Meanwhile, in New Jersey, Syracuse was also lighting it up.
Syracuse goes to the Final Four.
In central New York, the Orangemen were the toast of
Welcome to episode 4 of Iconic Seasons 1987, the year that saw one of the most iconic matchups in NCAA basketball history. On today's episode, we're going to be telling the story of Syracuse 1987. This team was the reflection of its fiery coach and 1980s Big East basketball, tough, physical, and unafraid. We also have an interview with Joe Combe, one of the players from that runner-up team. If you're a fan of Syracuse or basketball, you don't want to miss this episode. Tune in, and if you like it, leave us a rating and or review. This is episode 4 of Iconic Seasons 1987. The Syracuse Orange 1987 team. Head coach was Jim Boeheim in his 11th season. Their record was 31-7. Their leading scorer was Sherman Douglas at 17.2 points per game. And their leading rebounder was a freshman, Derek Coleman, with 8.8 rebounds per game. Sherman Douglas also led them assists with 7.6 assists per game.
Douglas and Coleman.
He certainly perfected the alley-oop. I mean, he would throw alley-oops and just come down from half court.
There's the alley-oop. This time it's Owens at the other end.
Their starters were Douglas, Coleman, Greg Monroe, Howard Trish, and Ronnie Cycli. The Orangemen entered the season trying to replace 3 players, Pearl Washington, Raf Addison, and Wendell Alexis, that ended up in the NBA and helped Syracuse collect a share of the Big East Conference regular season championship with St. John's. With not so high expectations, the city of Syracuse was pleasantly surprised when sophomore point guard Sherman Douglas ended up filling in nicely for Washington, and big men center Ronnie Cycli, who recovered quickly from a stress fracture in his left foot, and freshman Derek Coleman played extremely well. That trio, along with seniors Howard Trish and Greg Monroe, helped the Orangemen begin the season 15-0 and climb all the way up to number 5 in the nation. At the time, it was the best start under Boeheim ever. Syracuse's first loss of the season came in a game against the Michigan Wolverines. The loss ended up being one of 3 in a 5-game span. However, the Orangemen finished the season with a nice 7-2 run and captured a share of the Big East regular season crown with Pitt and Georgetown. In the Big East tournament, Syracuse defeated Villanova and Pitt to set up a championship game showdown with Georgetown, which defeated the Orangemen twice during the regular season. Revenge was not in the cards for Syracuse, as the Hoyas' Reggie Williams scored a game-high 25 points, including 5 three-pointers, and collected 9 rebounds to lead his team to a 69-59 victory. After the game, Boeheim said about Williams, "He's just a great player. If there is any better all-around player, I haven't seen him in a long time." Boeheim's quotes seem to come from a notebook. He has the least charismatic way of saying the most charismatic phrases.
Differently if you have the opportunity to do it over again, Coach. I don't ever second guess myself, James. I leave that up to you guys. I thought our kids played their heart out. I thought they did everything that we could possibly do. We played a great team. I thought we played as well as we could play. Indiana's a great basketball team, and they won the game at the end, and I think that's the way it should be. They made a great play at the end of the game to win.
Following the loss, Syracuse, 26-6, learned that it would be a number 2 seed in the East region and would host Georgia Southern in round 1, and then the winner of the number 10 seeded Western Kentucky or number 7 seed West Virginia in round 2. The East region also featured number 1 North Carolina, number 3 Purdue, and number 4 TCU. I think this is a good place to note that number 12 seeded Middle Tennessee State got a bid over Louisville in the East region. We can see the origins of the selection committee derision right here. Billy Packard calls into question the selection committee's decision because Louisville played a tougher schedule than Middle Tennessee State. Over 30 years later, the same argument still gets made. The Orangemen were trying to snap a streak of 4 straight second-round losses in the NCAAs. Struggling with Georgia Southern in the first round, they had no trouble with the Hilltoppers. The Hilltoppers game is noteworthy in that Western Kentucky decided the only way they could get back in the game was to deliberately foul Derek Brower, a notoriously poor free throw shooter. Free throws come up later for the Syracuse Orangemen. The end result was Brower, without the ball, was running around the court trying to avoid getting intentionally fouled by the Hilltoppers. McNeil, the Hilltoppers player, eventually succeeded in catching him and sending him to the free throw line. He would go 0 for 6 from the charity stripe. Over the summer, the NCAA would change the rules regarding intentional fouls, awarding free throws and the ball back to the team that was fouled. Cycli scored 33 points in a Sweet 16 victory over Florida, and then again went off for 26 points and 11 rebounds in a 79-75 victory over the Tar Heels in the regional final. The performance helped Boeheim earn his first trip to the Final Four as a head coach.
We have a good opportunity to go far in this tournament. And the first thing he said, you better go talk to Ronnie, because we need to have it down to the center.
I remember North Carolina being a big favorite, heavy favorite in that game.
So many McDonald's All-Americans they had on the team. They just were loaded with talent.
I remember Dick Vitale talking smack about Ronnie that, hey, guys at Carolina Tar Heels was going to eat them up, was going to kill us, was going to do this and do that.
So Ronnie was so fired up before the games. He was running up and down the hotel room in his boxer briefs, swinging a towel, saying, forget Vitale, he knows nothing. I'm getting JRE tomorrow.
I was like a caged dynamo. I just couldn't wait for that cage to open.
Wants it in low. Reed to help out. Cycli over the freshman.
Derek Coleman and I, we knew that these guys, they're good and all, but we've got them.
Coach. No man more deserving of a victory ride than that coach right there.
It was great to get Jim Boeheim to the Final Four. It was just happiness for everybody.
A few extra notes about the 1987 Final Four. It was the last NCAA tournament to feature home court advantage. It was the first NCAA tournament to feature the three-point shot. This was Boeheim's first Final Four as a head coach. Bob Knight was coaching in his fourth Final Four. He had led Indiana to championships in 76 and 81. Eventually, all four coaches, Knight, Pitino, Boeheim, and Tarkanian, would win national championships. And it was the first time in history that one shining moment was used in the epilogue. The semifinal featured Syracuse dominating Providence 77-63. And I could go into more of the details, but we'll leave that for the interview. I want to discuss the fight. I got to ask, what is Derek Coleman doing? He throws that haymaker that should have got him kicked out and should have changed the course of the game, and almost did, because Providence goes on a run after the fight. A special note here. A few weeks into the start of the next season, he was involved in a brawl with Cornell.
No technicals were called. This is just, there you see a punch flying and landing in there.
Just ahead, folks, went to see basketball last night in Syracuse, but it appeared a hockey game broke out.
And Ronnie gets a little upset with Nate Grant. And here we go, Brower and Gilda. Gilda's really being punched in there by Coleman, and this one is really getting violent and nasty.
Things got a little bit out of control in Syracuse last night. The Orangemen were hosting the Cornell Big Red, and a big fight broke out. Here's the play. Ronnie Cycli, he gets mugged by Nate Grant. Cycli, of course, pushes him. Keith Hughes got into it. Then Greg Gilda and Derek Brower go at it, and Derek Coleman starts throwing punches, and he wasn't even in the game at the time.
Where were all you guys with Dwayne since his mispractice? But Kane's a franchise player. Yeah. Whoop-de-damn do. So he's a part of the team, right, Dwayne? But he doesn't. So what are you saying? I'm saying just because Dwayne misses practice doesn't affect all of us?
Sets up this interesting thing about Derek Coleman, which I think is worth talking about, because he is one of the most talented basketball players I've ever seen. And if it was just the people he surrounded himself with or the attitude he brought to the game, it certainly kept him from reaching his full potential. If you watch this brawl with Cornell, you absolutely know that Derek Brower and Derek Coleman would never have returned to the floor. The funny thing about it is that Cornell's athletic department got a bunch of calls as well, because they were involved in another fight against Canisius 5 days earlier. Let's talk about the national championship game. Keith Smart, of course, scores 15 of his 19 points in the second half. Alfred went 7 for 10 from the three-point line. Derek Coleman, again, noting that talent, collected 19 rebounds. I have to say Jim Boeheim was able to throw some wicked fist pumps. His energy level is way higher than it would be in subsequent years.
You know it's going to be a great game. You want to get it played, and you don't want to stop something that's going to be this good.
In the end, Syracuse went 10 of 18 from the free throw line, and Coleman missed his lone late attempt. Boeheim uses one timeout with 1:42 to go, up 2, leaving himself with only that single timeout. They run a clear-out play for Sherman Douglas, who doesn't come close to making the shot. The most critical coaching error, though, was not calling a timeout as precious seconds ticked away after the Keith Smart shot. Just to ask Chris Webber, there must be something about New Orleans and timeouts. In the end, it was an amazing run for the Orange. and a title game that could have gone either way. This game is the epitome of what makes the NCAA tournament so iconic. We hope that you've enjoyed the storytelling of the 1987 Orangemen. Now, stay tuned for our first-person interview with Joe.
I went out for just for fun. I went out for the open division team in central New York, and I made it. And that team was made up at the time of Sean Cairns, who was, the captain at Syracuse at the time, and Sonny Spira, Howard Trish, Stuart Mitchell, who played at Cornell. Stuart was the quarterback at Cornell as well.
Oh, wow.
And we were the central team, and New York City had a team. Western New York had a team. It was really a big deal every summer. And so I made that team kind of surprisingly. I had a big jump that summer in, growing and I guess ability. And
what was it? What's your skill set? Like, what are you, what would you be known for?
Yeah,
shooter? Okay.
Shooter,
all right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's perfect for us. Yeah.
Shooter.
We love that. Yeah.
And, made that team surprisingly kind of. And it was coached by a guy named Paul Seymour, who coached in the NBA for many years. He retired to Syracuse. And Bernie Fine was the assistant at Syracuse, and he kind of helped out too. I got to know Coach Fine. And so after breaking my wrist at RIT, I called him up and said, could I just come to Syracuse? It's just been my dream. He said, you'd have to be a walk-on, but absolutely. So I came, and I had to go to walkout tryouts that first time. And after that, they said, you're on the team and the team for however long, for the rest of your time here. So no worries. So
that's cool.
That's how it happened for me. And
who gave you the news? Like, did all the coaches bring you into the office, or what was the situation like?
Well, they had the first night of tryouts. There was like 120 guys there.
Oh, wow.
They had like 2 minutes to show what you could do. And so they called 10 people back the next night. And
holy cow.
Asked me to come back. And we played for about an hour. And then afterwards, Coach Boeheim gathered all 10 people around and said, thanks for coming out. We're going to keep 2 guys. I really don't remember. I just had known Coach Fine, of course, Howard Trish, and I knew some of the guys. And when I first got to Syracuse in September, they asked me to come to the work out with the team. But I had a class and I couldn't go to the workout. So I kind of thought I knew I had a good shot. They knew who I was. Coach Fine knew who I was, and I knew the guys. And so I was just very happy to make it. And I didn't, they told me, you're on for good. So no worries. And from here on out. So
one of the guys that you played with, Pearl Washington, I just wanted to get your take. How would you characterize his impact on the Orange? And you mentioned that you called him a rock star. So what was it about him that had you using that kind of language with him?
His name was Dwayne Pearl Washington.
Once the Big East started, I think he's the one guy that people said, wow, I'd like to go there. That must be an exciting place.
There's an amazing buzz about him. He was just a magical person that could do anything.
Look at Pearl dribbling. Pearl stops and makes it in. Utterly incredible.
I remember going to LA before the Big East. I go to major high schools there. They didn't even have a clue. Jim Boeheim from where? Where's Syracuse? After Pearl was here, I went to LAX, and the baggage guy said, hey, you're Pearl's coach. What's going on?
The Orange can take the lead. Here goes the Pearl. Over to Curran. Absolutely sensational.
Well, Dwayne could not go anywhere in Syracuse without being mobbed. If he went to the mall, it was... as soon as it got out, he was at the mall, it drew a crowd. Really, everywhere he went, he was mobbed. So that was the rock star environment.
Got it, no doubt.
And even on campus, just, he anywhere he went, he drew a crowd. And the impact, I think one big impact, obviously, is that New York City adopted Syracuse as New York's team. Dwayne was from New York. The lights are brightest at Madison Square Garden, and Dwayne always played great there. And as a result of that, I think New York City really took on Syracuse as their adopted team. And it's always been that way. I mean, anytime Syracuse plays at the Garden, there's a ton of Syracuse fans there. So I think that's one way Dwayne impacted Syracuse. I think the other is he made Syracuse a national program, and we were able to begin recruiting in California, all across the country, whereas previously I don't think Syracuse had really done that before. And they were, Dwayne made us recognizable on a national stage. So,
you think back to, pretty dynamic figure there, Joe, Pearl Washington. Do you have a favorite Pearl story, something that really sticks out about kind of who he was as a player, as a person, whether it be from practice or a game or just something that really sticks out about who he was?
Well, first of all, I think Dwayne was unique as a player. He didn't have the traditional point guard build. He wasn't slight. He was thicker. And when he was coming down, he was on the fast break, it was like a block of granite coming at you. He was really a sturdy player. He wasn't a tremendous athlete. He wasn't somebody that could jump out of the gym, but of course, the handle was incredible. The shot, but he just wasn't kind of the traditional, like what you would see today. He wasn't what you would think of Russell Westbrook or somebody like that. He was thicker. In terms of what made Dwayne, I think, special is he didn't act like he was special. He never elevated himself above the rest of the team. He was very quiet, something a lot of people don't know about Dwayne. Maybe he was a little bit uncomfortable with all the attention. He loved the game, obviously. I think my favorite Pearl memory for me would be, I think, that the game against Georgetown. It would have been Dwayne's sophomore season. Georgetown came into the Dome. I think they were number one in the country. And Dwayne hit a shot with just a couple seconds left to beat them. So him hitting that shot against Georgetown, and he's famous for the shot against the half-court shot there against Boston College the season before. And everyone, when they think of Dwayne at Syracuse, think of that shot. But for me, I guess that he hit the jumper with just a couple seconds left against Georgetown.
16 seconds left. Got to get it in. Here's Monroe. Into the Pearl's hands behind the back. The Pearl putting on a show. He shot it!
Absolutely extraordinary. Pearl did things with the basketball nobody ever could do, and he did it in big moments, and he's a big reason the Big East got to where it got to.
Syracuse wins! Bedlam at the Carrier Dome. The Pearl hits a shot with 6 seconds left.
And, he was incredible. That's all I said.
So heading into that season, the Pearl's gone. Did you guys come in with a sense that this is going to be a great team? Like, we're going to the national championship? I always wonder that, at the start of every season, if you ask any coach or player, they're like, yeah, we got national title or tournament expectations, when there's only a few teams that end up going. But I'm curious, like, what was your guys' mentality going into that season?
Well, obviously tournament, we're going to the tournament. And I think
that's a given for Syracuse.
Right, that's a given. And I don't think anyone expects to go to the national championship game, because anything can happen. I don't think anyone realistically can say, well, we're going to the national championship game. You can't say that, but there is a culture at Syracuse where you do expect to be special every year. That's part of the DNA.
Had the all Big East point guard 6 years in a row. We're talking 6 years straight having the best point guard in the conference, and that's a tremendous achievement for these guards, and it says something about the way we run our program. We like to run. We're a fast break team, and if you're going to be a fast break team, your point guard has to make things happen for you.
So even going into that season, we expected to be very, very good. But you're right. The question hanging over the team is, what Pearl is gone, what do we do now? And I think part of the criticism against Syracuse sometimes was, when we had Dwayne, was, okay, you just give Dwayne the ball and everyone gets out. What happened? Yeah. What happens now when you really have to play together? And of course, Sherman Douglas, proven. What's he going to be like? And of course, he was general. He was tremendous.
Douglas spins. Oh, hits! Goodness, what a goal!
We knew Sherman was good, but we really didn't know how good because he'd never been in the game situation. And he came in and was the best point guard in the league.
From Washington, D.C., number 20, Captain General Sherman Douglas.
He was the most intense competitor that I've ever coached. And I've coached a few. But he wanted to win every game, every play, every practice.
There's an infamous story where, him and Derek Coleman started going at it, and Sherman Douglas came up and tried to kick him and hit him at the same time. I mean, how many guys would do that on this planet?
Douglas and Coleman.
The promise game, he had to have at least 8 alley-oops for dunks in one game.
Beautiful timing. There it is again.
Yep. So there was definitely a question over our head, but we're Syracuse and we always expect to be good.
I mean, you guys are in the Big East, and you're in a real glory time of the Big East, or a really kind of celebrated time of the Big East. And you said, I sat there thinking, this is hand-to-hand combat. I'd never seen anything like that on a basketball court ever. Yeah. So how did you guys prepare for Big East basketball in that era and the physical grind that it was? I mean, what did Coach Boeheim put you guys through to prepare you for, you want to be successful in Big East basketball? This is what we need to do. So how did you guys prepare for that?
We had a drill. I'm certain they're not doing this drill anymore. They had a drill. So you have the lane, right? You've got the lane. And the drill is there's 3 people in the lane and 1 basketball. And you can't leave the lane until you make 3 baskets. And there are no fouls. Okay?
Oh, my Lord.
There are no fouls.
This is the anti-load management.
Yes, exactly. And that was a brutal drill. And I mean, if you can't score 3 baskets, you're dying. And no fouls. And yes. And so that was the drill to prepare you to play in the Big East. But I think that league, it's a crucible. Really, it's a crucible, and it refines you. And you're used to playing that. You're used to playing that way, and I've heard Coach Boeheim say, if there was no blood on the floor, then you didn't really have a game. And that's really how it was. I mean, it was. You watch. I mean, you guys would talk about Pearl. If you remember Patrick Ewing throwing a punch at Pearl, but you watch some Big East games, and there was people. Now, somebody comes off the bench for an altercation, they're suspended. They've got all these things that they have to go through. That was really a regular Big East game. There were scuffles and fights, and that was just part of playing in the league at that time. And that was back in the 6 fouls, right? Remember, there were 6 fouls.
Yeah.
Which changes the strategy a little bit, doesn't it? I mean, suddenly it gets 2 fouls on the half, but it's not that big of a deal if you're playing with 6 fouls. So. There were some tough guys. There were some tough guys in that league at the time.
What was the team that you guys got up for playing? Like the week before, the practice squad is trying to get the guys pumped, and
Georgetown,
this is the team.
It's Georgetown. There's no Georgetown. That was the premier rivalry in the Big East at the time. I think it was the premier rivalry. People talk Duke, North Carolina, and yep, that's a great rivalry. But for my money, Syracuse Georgetown was the most intense rivalry. Even going back a few years, if you look at the Georgetown team, they had, I don't know if you guys remember a player named Michael the Enforcer Graham.
Yeah.
With Georgetown. I mean, Michael Graham was probably the most physical player in the history of the Big East. He one time threw a punch at Andre Hawkins, and Coach Boeheim in the press conference after the game threw a chair. I mean, that was what it was like back then. That was the intensity in the Big East at the time, the rivalry with Georgetown. And the last game in Manley Fieldhouse was Syracuse Georgetown, and Syracuse at the time had a long winning streak in Manley Fieldhouse. That was the time of Roosevelt Bowie, Louis Orr, Tony Red Bruin. We had I'm not sure what the winning streak was at the time, but it was significant. And this was the last game in the Carrier Dome last game in Manley Fieldhouse before we were going to the Carrier Dome. And Georgetown came and they beat Syracuse. And John Thompson in the press conference said, Manley Fieldhouse is officially closed. Yes. Well, I can only speak for my time with Derek. And first of all, the thing that jumps out at me about Derek was the ability. You know, his nickname, we used to call him Coast. In practice, he used to like to go coast to coast. You know, he'd get a rebound, put the ball on the floor and go coast. So we'd always call him Coast. And just, you know, 6'10", 6'11", could handle the ball. So the ability was just off the charts. And, you know, Derek, another guy, just a great teammate, not elevating himself among other players, treating every player on the team equally, you know, the managers, the staff, everything, just really a really good person.
Douglas driving in the alley-oop. Oh, my goodness.
The people in Syracuse have just been fantastic to us.
Well, he knows right away to find Derek Coleman. All he does is throw the ball up there. Derek Coleman with his big hands, long arms, gets it. And I think he liked it.
Derek Coleman giving us his best reaction shots of the day.
One of my favorite people to be a teammate of is Derek Coleman. Derek played 4 years at Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So as a freshman, the NBA is still a long ways away, probably in his mind.
Yeah.
Where today he might be thinking, yeah, I'm one and done and I'm out. But back then, that really wasn't a mindset that a lot of players had. So he was totally focused and locked in on Syracuse and being at Syracuse. And Derek was a great teammate.
You're going in and you're up to the Final Four, or close to the Final Four. Give me the scene of beating UNC and coming back to Syracuse.
Yes, that was a great game. I always felt like, for my money, that was Coach Boeheim's best coaching job, because we're in the Meadowlands in New Jersey, and how it was set up for practice. You know, each team got an hour in the court to practice the day before. We had that hour, and instead of, you know, a run through drills and all that stuff, my recollection is that Coach Boeheim, we went out to center court, and of course we were dressed for practice, but we were all in a circle around him, semicircle. And for half an hour, he talked about what we needed to do to beat North Carolina. Kept talking about how we have to win the boards. We have to rebound. Because that team, if you remember, it was Kenny Smith, J.R. Reed, Joe Wolf, Dave Popson, Buzz Peterson, who coached for a while. So those first four are all NBA guys. Yeah. And they're all big guys, right? Yep. So Coach Boeheim just kept talking to us about rebounding. We got to box out. Let's box out. And he, for 45 minutes, I remember he just talked about, this is what we have to do. You know, it wasn't a traditional practice or anything like that. And that was the only time I ever remember something like that happening. And so we did beat North Carolina. We beat that team. They were a great team. We were going to the Final Four, and we came home. We flew back to Syracuse, and there were 10,000 people waiting for us.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Yep. So that was a great day. And then we had to play Providence, who we had beat twice already that year. And they had Billy Donovan was their point guard. Rick Pitino was their coach. We had beat them twice already. And Providence played UNLV. And I was surprised that Providence won that game, because, you know, UNLV was very talented that year. They had a guy named Freddie Banks, who was a great shooter. Another guy named Armand Gilliam, who played in the league.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought for sure UNLV would win that game, but Providence was so well coached, and Billy Donovan was a great player. So there's an old saying in sports, you can't beat a good team 3 times. Yeah, but we did win. So that got us to the championship game.
In a recent conversation, SU basketball coach Jim Boeheim reflects on the highs and lows of that incredible journey to New Orleans in 1987. Syracuse went wild when the Orangemen beat North Carolina and won a berth in the Final Four.
That was a huge factor for me, being here for really all my adult life in Syracuse and seeing the support we get.
The fans were rewarded with a victory over Providence. And then came a game neither the fans nor Boeheim will ever forget.
We really had pretty good control of the game. It wasn't a game that was even. We really had control the last 7 or 8 minutes, and we just couldn't quite put it away. Indiana made a couple great plays. We didn't really do anything bad at the end. Indiana made a couple real good shots and won a very close game.
But in the final seconds, Indiana's Keith Smart made his famous jump shot.
Smart takes the shot, and the Hoosiers with 3 seconds. Go ahead. Nobody stopped.
We really weren't effective.
But when you lose like that and you have such a great opportunity to win, it's very difficult to get over. I think that game lives with you forever, certainly for at least 5 to 6, 7 years. It was almost an everyday thought in your mind, and after 10 years or so, it's not an everyday thought, but it occurs from time to time.
And so, Joe, you talk about the North Carolina game and the Elite Eight that gets you to the Final Four, how Coach Boeheim is saying rebound, rebound, rebound. We want to get to the Final Four, we got to rebound.
Yep.
You do that, you beat UNC. You beat Providence, and you head into this championship game with Indiana. What do you recall about the preparations for the championship game? You know, what were the priorities? What was at the top of the whiteboard for the Orange that game?
I can tell you what the traditional chalkboard. There were no whiteboards back then. It was Coach Bank's board. And I can't tell you what a chalkboard looked like in the Syracuse basketball. It was the other team starting 5 with little notes about each person. And then, you know, maybe 2 or 3 points of emphasis for each game. So I don't remember exactly what Indiana's points of emphasis were, but you know, they were a great team. You know, they had Dean Garrett, Daryl Thomas. I think they both went on to play in the NBA. And of course, Steve Alford and Keith Smart. I mean, they were a great team, no doubt about it.
Keith Smart. Anything you remember about just kind of the moments before you guys take the floor for the national championship?
Well, it was a huge locker room, And our locker room in the Carrier Dome was huge, but this was a huge locker room. And the run to the court, you know, when you came out, the court, it was endless to run to the court. And, you know, the Superdome is just cavernous, massive cavernous. Other than that, you know, it's kind of the same routine that you've done, you know, the whole time you've been at Syracuse. You know, there's nothing, you know, different from what Coach Boeheim did. This is our routine. We're going to stick to it. This is the talk that we give. And then Father Charles, our Catholic priest, would come in and give us a little talk, and we'd say the Lord's Prayer, and then we'd run out, and it was game time. So there really wasn't a lot of deviation in what we did. And I think that's part of who Coach Boeheim is, right? There's consistency there. So yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. Obviously not just another game, but I think the more you stick to a routine, the more comfortable that you remain. He's very fiery in the very best sense. I mean, Coach Boeheim is 70. I think he's 73 years old, and he's as passionate now. You watch him. He's now as he was when he was 40. And he's a very competitive person. The consistency is there. You look at this incredible, 44-year coaching career, and he's never had a season where he's laid an egg, right? I say it with all due respect. You're talking about North Carolina, but there was a year, with Matt Doherty when they won 9 games. You look this year at Carolina, they won, I think, 13 games. And Jim Boeheim has never had a year like that. You know what you're going to get with Coach Boeheim. And I think the other thing about Coach Boeheim is he defends his players. All you have to do is YouTube not 10 games with Jerry McNamara. Watch that clip where someone had said, Syracuse wouldn't have won 10 games without Jerry McNamara, and watch Coach Boeheim's response. We've been in a lot of close games playing at that level and watching this team.
I always had a really good rapport with Coach Boeheim because he would do the camps up at Syracuse. I never forget, he used to always walk in and he'd be wearing like $40, $50 leather sneakers, and he'd be walking on the back of them because he just came back from golfing. I was like, man, that's pretty laid back. I could play for somebody like that.
I think we were leading for a good, I think we were down at the half, but we were leading very late into the game with just, maybe a minute left. I think we were up, 4, maybe even had the ball. And so obviously anything can happen, but I do remember at one point looking up in the stands, and my mom, and at that time my fiance, was at the game.
Oh, wow.
I remember looking at them and thinking to myself, I'm going to being on a national championship team and have a ring. And so those were my thoughts at the time. Hey, this might happen. And I think, some of my other people next to me, were I'm sure if they're honest, they were probably entertaining the same thought. Yeah.
No doubt.
Yep.
You guys are playing man-to-man, which is not what people associate with Syracuse basketball at all. But take us through the final seconds of that game, through the Smart jumper. What stands out in the last, 20 seconds of that game up until, Keith Smart hits the jumper to seal the game?
Yeah, Syracuse played a little bit more man-to-man back in those days, believe it or not. I think the things that I remember, coming out of that timeout, has the ball. And obviously, we had the lead, but exactly, they're going to get a shot at it. And I can remember looking down and seeing it unfold and looking at it and going through the net. And, just that dagger, it's like somebody stabs you. It's a dagger for sure. It was tough. It was tough. And you see how the game has evolved. The last few seconds of games now are just micromanaged with microseconds. And that really wasn't how it was like maybe back then. So when the ball went through the net, there was just this deflation, and it was hard, really to react, to get a timeout. And it was just so deflating, which is, you're right. We're in a different time and place right now, and 4 seconds is an eternity in the basketball games now, but maybe back then it just wasn't seen that way.
So that 87 game, he's never watched it. Have you?
No, never. And I never will.
Oh my gosh.
I never ever will. And sometimes they'll show it on ESPN Classic, and I'll have friends call me up and say, "Hey, turn on the game. They're showing it on ESPN Classic." And I'll say, my answer is, I'll tell you what, call me back if we win.
Indiana wins the championship. Keith Smart is the hero.
It's a chance to win the 2003 national championship in a place that is the worst place for Syracuse basketball fans till that point, the Louisiana Superdome, where in 1987, and Keith Smart, and Bob Knight, and Indiana, you say all those things, and you just want to get violently ill.
There was no doubt I was going to miss that game. It's in the Superdome. We lost there. I want my revenge.
There was no way that they were going to lose that game after the double-digit lead, the first half advantage. And then in the back of your mind, you remember, didn't we have a big lead on Indiana?
I was like, not again, please. Same place, same scenario, same storyline. I thought that, no, it can't happen, it can't happen, it can't happen.
Heinrich was
I'm not watching it.
That's a perfect answer.
I'm just not watching it. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I just saw the thing. Steph Curry just did a thing on the history of the jump shot. And here it is, the introduction to that. They show that shot.
So what did you take away from that game, that season, being so close to winning it all and having a great run too, and really a great experience? What do you take away from that?
It was a formative event in my life, and I keep a picture of that shot in my wallet. I've kept it in my wallet, and I've had a great life. But that event, anytime I had a professional challenge in front of me, a big meeting, whatever, I would take that picture out and I would look at it. And I would say to myself, I'm not losing again.
Oh man, that's cool.
So, maybe I need professional help. I don't know. But it's been a really, in a sense, a good thing out of a bad thing, because I don't want that feeling anymore in anything. The interesting thing, and I'm certainly not complaining or whining, but that shot, it follows you around. So if I'm out somewhere or something, and I don't advertise it, but if someone, if it just comes up, hey, I played basketball at Syracuse, the first words out of people's mouth, Keith Smart. That's the first word. So if it's followed you around, that shot followed me around, and it hasn't gone away. And,
how do you feel when they finally won in 2003? And did you get to go to that game at all?
I was obviously thrilled for the university, thrilled for the team, thrilled for Coach Boeheim. And, that win took place in the Superdome. So there was kind of an exorcism of some demons another good game. And, Carmelo obviously is an incredible player and so meaningful to the university and continues to be meaningful for the university.
I always thought we could win. We didn't always win, but I always thought we could. If you were to ask Boeheim after the game was over, I heard him say this later. I said, that's a hard loss. I said, I know that. I said, but you'll win this. That's pretty nice of me.
The people here are great. The fans are great. They support us. Good people. And we've been able to have a great basketball program here, which is all I've ever cared about.
Unbelievable fans. They're the best fans in the country. They support the team through thick and thin.
I'll bleed orange to the day I die. And to put on that jersey and perform out here in front of these wonderful fans, to come running out that dome, out that tunnel, it means a lot to me. And if I could go back, I would do the same thing again. I would choose to come to Syracuse.
To actually put that uniform on, that was one of the best feelings ever.
Biggest honor of my life is putting on the Syracuse jersey and to represent the name on the front with your name on the back.
This is my second home. All the love and support from the fans here.
Thank you for joining us for this look back at the 1987 Syracuse Orangemen. Iconic Seasons is a principal podcast production. I'm your host and executive producer, Aaron Meyer. Special thanks to all our guests for sharing their journeys. If you enjoy this series, head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts and follow the show. And make sure to leave us a rating and review. It really helps us and it helps others discover the show. If you're interested in a bonus episode, send us your questions via email. Our email address is hardwoodhistory@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next with episode 5, recapping the Final Four game between Syracuse and Providence.